Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. I've got Dash from Texas with me in the live stream today. This is yet another conversation that emerged from a Twitter thread where I was like, man, there's some really fired up Biden supporters who are pissed about people like me asking for more consideration of Dean Phillips or asking for a Biden town hall. And I found that you can only get so far and back and forth on Twitter, especially when people start just resorting to memes and things. So I put a call out. I said, are there any Biden supporters who would be open to coming on to the Nerds for Humanity live stream? And let's just talk like two citizens who care about the country and have different opinions, and see if we can just hear each other out a little bit. And Dash, you were one of the people that said, hey, I'll do it. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And as I'm told, hello, nerds. So yes, I'm from Austin, and I am a sophomore right now at UT, studying to be a music teacher. And I'm a fervent Biden supporter. I wasn't old enough to vote 4 years ago, but would have voted for him both in the primary and the general. He's been my man. Not necessarily because I agree with him on every single issue. I think there's somewhere I disagree. But I think he's the best candidate to beat Trump. He definitely was in 2020. And as I'll explain throughout this conversation, while, yes, I think there are some risks with him running in 2020, the risks of not having him on the ticket are actually worse than having it off the ticket. So, again, that's why I'm a Biden supporter, because I agree with him, again, on 95% of the issues, and I think he's going to win re-election.
All right. Well, I mean, we have something in common in that I too, in the general, not in the primary, but in the general of 2020, supported Biden, volunteered for his campaign, donated funds to his campaign. So, and I was probably one of the happiest people out there when it was declared that Biden won, and we avoided a second Trump term. And for me, that is my North Star, which is how do we avoid a second Trump term? I really feel like Trump has become less disciplined and more vengeful. And he also, I feel, does not have the same kind of executive function that he may have had in the past. Um, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on what you see of Biden lately? Like, do you feel like this is a guy that is gonna do a great job in his version of the Super Bowl?
Yeah, and I think there are two ways. We have to separate the two things between Biden and our consideration of him. The first is, can he be president, right? And the whole consideration is, if he's going to be 86 years old, can he be president? And the question is, I think so. Now, there may come a point, and we don't know, where he's in the middle of his second term, hopefully he wins, where maybe he has a health problem. And if he does, I don't really suspect that he's going to run through the presidency while completely brain dead. Okay. I don't think he's brain dead right now. And I think anybody who says that is just a partisan hack for the Republicans who's trying to say he can't be president. Now, if you're saying he doesn't have the physical health to run for president against Trump, I don't think you're a partisan hack at all. I just disagree with the risk of taking him off the ticket. So here's what I see the presidential election being. Okay. There are 6 states that are going to decide the election: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. That's it, right? Because there are 20 states that were won by Hillary Clinton, and only one of those, which is Nevada, is on those 6, right? The other 5 were won by Trump in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Trump has 25 states that, if Biden were to win any of them, which would include things like North Carolina, Texas, Florida, Ohio, Iowa, if Biden were to win any of those, the election's over, right? Biden's won all those other 6. And then the only ones that were won by Hillary and Biden, other than Nevada, that are Minnesota and New Hampshire, that might be won by Trump. If Trump wins any of those, he's won the other 6. So really, we're looking at which individual can win in those 6 states. And when I look at Dean Phillips, I don't see somebody who can win those 6 states. I think he can obviously win Minnesota. and that might help him in Wisconsin and Michigan. I don't know about Georgia, right? You've got a lot of black voters in Georgia who are going to be skeptical of him. I don't know about Nevada and Arizona. Are the unions going to like Dean in Nevada? They do like Biden, right? If you don't have the support of the unions in Nevada, I don't know, right? And I think the other thing that's super important to note is the replacements to Joe Biden. If we were to remove him from the ticket, the top two people that we would replace Joe Biden with right now, the most likely ones are Kamala, who's a VP, and Gavin Newsom. Both of those, when I look at those 6 states, I think that both of those are riskier candidates than Joe Biden. And so it's a calculation. You say, okay, maybe there's someone out there like a Roy Cooper from North Carolina or a Gretchen Whitmer, and you say, maybe they might be a good candidate. But we don't really know. The only ones that we know are Gavin Newsom and Kamala. And they actually scare me in an election, not because they're bad people, but because I think they're going to lose. The polls say Kamala does at least 2.5 points worse than Joe Biden in the polling in all of those states. And I think when Gavin Newsom shows up to a place like Wisconsin, he's got to win all those voters in the suburbs of Milwaukee. And what they're going to be saying is whether or not the reputation is correct, you've got California has a reputation of having high crime, it's too liberal, big spenders. They don't those voters in Milwaukee and suburban Detroit and suburban Philly and Pitt, they don't necessarily think Joe Biden's God, but they don't view him as extreme. They don't view him as a big spender who's going to spend away my tax money on useless things, right? They will view Gavin Newsom that way, and I think it is our what's the right way to say it? Recency bias, where we're looking at this very small picture of the president and we're not looking in the big picture. So again, I think Joe Biden has the capability to run for president. So to answer your question, I think he is physically able to run for president, and I certainly think, based on all of his accomplishments in the first 4 years, I don't think there's any dispute among people who are Democrats. He can be president. I think the only thing that we need to debate, which is again a really civil debate that needs to be happening, is can he run for president?
Why do you think he's trailing Trump in most of those battleground state polls?
I think there's a very simple explanation. It has to do with non-response bias, right? 50%, over 50% of the voters don't even know what's going on, right? Over 50% don't think the election will be between Biden and Trump. Those of us who are watching the primaries know. I mean, look, I know you support Phillips, but I mean, it's probably going to be Biden. Like, again, whether or not you agree who is the better candidate, the evidence is clear that Biden is winning the primary. I don't think there's any dispute about that. Like, I will definitely say, I think Nikki Haley is better against Biden, but I know Nikki Haley is not going to win that primary. It's not about what we want. I'm just saying these are the facts. Most voters don't know how primaries work, right? And you've got a lot of these voters who are tuned out. And a lot of these polls that I've been seeing have these really big errors. Okay. One of those was a poll in Michigan that made a big headline. It was Detroit News poll. It said Biden was down by 8 to 10 points in Michigan. And when you looked at the poll, you said, wow, that's really scary. Okay. And I understand that's a big number. Then when you dive deep into the poll, you saw that there was in that poll, it showed Governor Gretchen Whitmer losing to Donald Trump in the general election. And this isn't a case of no name ID. This is Michigan. She's the governor there. I can understand the argument that, if you just put a random Democrat like Dean Phillips on a poll and say, oh, he's losing to Trump, you could say, yeah, but most voters don't know who he is yet. But voters in Michigan know who Whitmer is. And if she's losing to Trump in that poll, that either implies Trump's going to win in a landslide, which he's not, or the polling is not very good. And then the second thing I would say is a lot of polls, when you look at them on the outside, not just general election polls, have been showing skewed results for things that benefit Republicans. A big example of this is there have been all these different headlines about how support for same-sex marriage has been dropping in the last 2 years, even though we know that for the past 15 years, actually more like 20, support for gay marriage increased every single year. So why did it go down in the last 2 years, right? Is there really an organic explanation? I don't really think so, right? I don't think there are many voters who said, I support gay marriage, and then in the last 2 years said, never mind, right? What I think it is there is something in the polling, we don't necessarily know what it is, that is causing socially conservative voters to show up more in the polling, which means that Trump is going to benefit from that. And the analogy that I like to use for this is, if you're some Greek philosopher or astronomer and you have your telescope, right? You don't really know a lot. You don't really have a lot of technology to understand the world. But you're looking out into the Mediterranean Sea and you're watching one of your warships go to the south. And as you're watching it, you're looking at that telescope and you see the ship go over the horizon, and you realize the science based on that would imply the Earth cannot be flat, right? You realize the Earth can't be flat. Now, you don't know for sure that the Earth is a perfect sphere. You don't know how big it is. You don't know that the Earth orbits the sun or the sun orbits the Earth. Like, you don't know which one is correct. You don't know what the distance of the stars is. All you know is, when I look out there, what my theory, the idea that the Earth is flat cannot be true. And I think this is what we have to understand. We don't know exactly what's going on with these polls. But when you look at all the different things compared to Joe Biden that don't make sense, I'm not saying Joe Biden's absolutely going to win in a landslide, right? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is the polling shows there's something off.
All right. So I heard two things there that I wanted to respond to. The first one is that, well, these polls aren't reliable because people don't know, they're not paying attention. They don't know that it's going to be between Trump and Biden. I mean, the polls, the New York Times Siena poll literally asked them, if you had to choose between Trump and Biden, who would you choose? So it's not like people thought, let's say in Nevada that there were like 30-40% of the people that thought there was a third option. The second thing is that this poll, the New York Times Siena one, which is the number one most trustworthy one based on 537, like 100 previous New York Times Siena polls, this one did not say that Whitmer would lose in Michigan. And it does say that it's closer than 10 points. It's a 5-point loss that Biden would have in Michigan. My question for you, Dash, is, since we both, it sounds like, believe that Trump is a terrible person and a terrible choice, why is it so close? Shouldn't Biden be crushing Trump?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, first off, I think I understand the argument that, well, these voters were asked about Biden versus Trump. The only thing that I would respond with is, polling today, it used to be that about 80 to 90% of people would answer these polls. The people who actually answer the polls, it's like 5 to 10%. And so then by the time you get to that low of a percentage, you almost have to ask, who answers the poll, right? What is it about a person who actually decides to answer a poll? Again, it may be that Trump is winning. I'm not saying it's not true, but what we have to do is ask ourselves, who responds to a poll in February? It's going to be a lot of the politically engaged people. And the New York Times is polling the 6 states that matter. And I'm glad they understand that those are the 6 states that matter, because really no other state matters. But there were a couple of things that I thought were interesting about states where there was actually involvement and engagement. One of those was New Hampshire, right? And there were a lot of actually high quality polls. Again, I'm not saying that those polls were necessarily accurate, because again, I'm not trusting any of the polling right now. When they polled New Hampshire, it showed Biden up from 7 to 12 points over the course of the last 3 months. Biden won New Hampshire by 7 points in 2020. Hillary Clinton only won it by 0.4%. And the reason that Biden's increase in the vote happened in New Hampshire was because college-educated voters swung to Biden by a lot. And it probably means that college-educated voters are going to swing to him again. And when I look at those polls and I say, why is Biden up 7 to 12? It's because New Hampshire had a primary. Right? They had a primary, a Republican primary, and they did have a real Democratic primary. I mean, Dean Phillips got 19% of the vote. I mean, that's not insignificant. I'm not going to downplay that and say, oh, he's a loser. He got 19% of the vote. So they had a primary going on. They're engaged, and that's why people who are supporting Biden answer the phone. It's not necessarily about whether who they're polling, it's who actually answers the phone. And there used to be a time when pollsters had problems with people with landlines. Now they're having problems with cell phones. So again, I'm not saying that those polls showing him up 7 to 12 are correct. I'm just saying we need to keep that in mind. Same thing in Iowa, right? Iowa had a caucus, right? The polls in Iowa are showing Trump up by 8 to 10 in Iowa, right? Trump beat Biden by 8 in Iowa in 2020, beat Hillary by 9. if that's the same polling, if it's in that universe, I'm feeling good. Again, I'm not saying it's accurate, because again, I'm not trusting any of the accuracy of the polling right now because it's February. I think it's about engagement. And then there was another thing you asked I forgot about. What was it?
Well, we talked about people were asked directly if it were Trump versus Biden, and then I said the second point was that you had mentioned, oh, these polls think that Whitmer's going to lose, therefore it's not reliable, and I just wanted to call out that that poll I was referring to did not come to that conclusion about Whitmer.
Oh, well, right, but again, but it's one poll, and I'm saying, yes, the Detroit News one was also one poll. But what I'm saying is, you've got these polls that are just all over the place. You've got YouGov has had about 6 polls in a row over the last 3 months showing Biden up by 30 with voters my age. I'm 19 years old. And then you've got the New York Times poll saying Biden's up by 3. I don't know which one's right, but I know that the polling should not be that way. And in 2016, this is actually something I was looking up a couple days ago. The one swing state where Hillary Clinton overperformed her polling was the state of Nevada. Most of the Nevada polling actually showed Donald Trump winning Nevada. And a big part of that is always you have to keep in mind that Nevada Democrats are probably the best at organization and turnout in the country. Nevada Democrats and Georgia Democrats are terrific at what they do. So keep that in mind. Maybe that's why she overperformed. In the polling that showed Donald Trump ahead, there was a CNN poll a week before the election in 2016 that showed Donald Trump leading by 4. Hillary Clinton won Nevada by 2 points. The polling showed that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were tied among young voters. And this is the whole issue that we're having about the Trump-Biden polling among young voters. It showed Hillary and Trump tied among young voters in Nevada. Turned out Hillary Clinton won young voters by double digits. And if the polling, if in the one state where Hillary Clinton overperformed her polling was because Donald Trump was overperforming with young voters in the poll, again, I'm not saying necessarily that's why this is happening, but we just need to question it.
Gotcha. You know, with respect to the accuracy of polling, like I think we can agree that polls are just pulled from what they try to make as representative samples. It's never going to be as accurate as you want, and it's only a moment in time. But I did want to share that, and I'm not a shill for the New York Times, but they are pretty good at their polling. Their 2022 midterm election results. This is a comparison of what they said would happen, and then what actually happened across multiple states. And in every case, yeah, they were off by the margin, but it was rare that they said, oh, a Republican's going to win and then the Democrat wins. Like when they say the Democrat's going to win, like the Democrat won, maybe not by as much. Same on the Republican side. That's from the 2022 comparison of midterm polling and midterm actual results.
I'm not going to. And I think the New York Times, I trust them, and I'm not saying that they are a bad poll. I'm just pointing out there are just so many factors that are just screaming, we gotta wait. Again, if these polls are showing in September and October, I'll be the first to admit, okay, we have a problem. But I'm a little skeptical when the Democrats, again, the midterm elections almost perfectly matched the 2020 election results, almost to the exact letter. I think there were only 9 districts where a Republican won in a district won by Biden, or a Democrat won in a district won by Trump. Maybe it was more like 15 because you had those districts in New York that flipped from Democratic to Republican. Part of that was redistricting. So why is it that we see in a midterm result where the voters are basically, it was like 2020, it was just a complete repeat. It was like the Twilight Zone. It just, oh yeah, there it is again, Groundhog Day again. And then months later, you see these polls showing Trump beating the crap out of Biden, like in that ABC News Washington Post poll showing Trump up by 10. Again, it doesn't really add up when we know that only about 5% of the electorate is actually going to change their vote or is even amenable to voting for one or the other. 95% of people have made up their mind.
Let me give you a theory of the case on your 2022 midterm results point, which I agree was a very good showing for the Democratic Party. and I was pleasantly surprised, and it was very good to see. I think the Roe v. Wade thing helped with recency around that election. I hope it will be more wind in the sails for the Democratic ticket, whoever it may be, in November. The one thing I would say is the performance in the midterms of 2022 wasn't really, I don't think, a endorsement or criticism of Biden. I think it was individual, districts and states choosing how they wanted for their local representation. And the difference with 2024 is Biden will be on the ballot, and a lot of us were willing. I know you were a supporter of Biden in the last primary, but a lot of us kind of held our nose and said, "Well, I definitely don't want Trump. Biden seems he's fine." But I think a lot of us are saying, I'm not sure if he's fine now. And I'm wondering, maybe this is a question for you. Like, I am one of the big advocates for seeing more of Biden now and not waiting till October. A lot of people are saying, hey, you're just trying to hurt him. Don't make him do a town hall. Well, why is that so unreasonable, especially given all the questions that are coming up about his readiness?
Well, a couple of things. When it comes to the town hall, look, there have been 29 politicians who've run against Donald Trump, and there's one who beat him. Only one, and it's Joe Biden. And right now, in the month of February, most voters are just not going to care about a town hall that's happening with Joe Biden. I don't think he'll be hurt by a town hall, and I don't think he's doing it because he's avoiding it. It's just this is not really a time where a lot of Americans are going to care about it. Right now, he's got the State of the Union coming up. That's going to be his big test. And every time that we've had a big test of Joe Biden where everybody says, oh, God, Biden is washed, right? Best example, 2020 Democratic National Convention. For months, the Trump team have been playing up this whole thing of, oh, Biden needs to take a cognitive test. He was doing interviews, in his proverbial basement. I don't even know if it was actually his basement. Where he was having to defend these things about a cognitive test. We've kind of forgotten it because it's been 4 years. He was having to defend his cognitive health 4 years ago. And what it actually did is it just lowered the expectations of everybody. So everybody thought, oh, God, Biden's going to do this Democratic convention speech where nobody's going to be in the crowd and he's going to stumble over his words. And then by the end of the speech, you heard Chris Wallace on Fox News going, wow, that was pretty good. It was a really good convention speech. And I think it actually won him the election because voters actually tuned in because they're like, oh, yeah, what's going on? There's an election. Oh, yeah, the whole thing I've heard about Joe Biden being washed, he did pretty good, right? And there are all these different little tests that are going to happen, right? The State of the Union is going to be in March. That's his test, right? Americans do tune into the State of the Union. Okay, I know that there are some things that voters just don't tune into. I think after the State of the Union, he's going to start doing events. It doesn't have to be a town hall yet. I think when the debates against Biden and Trump inevitably don't actually happen, because right now Donald Trump's not even allowed to participate in the debate because the RNC made a rule for that, Biden will do town halls. Again, most voters don't tune into the election until September, until Labor Day. I think he's doing fine. Right now, I think his focus needs to be State of the Union. He's got a lot of things he can hit the Republicans on in that State of the Union. Last year, he literally won the negotiation to take out Social Security and Medicare by making all the Republicans stand up and say, I am not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. Boom, took it off the table. I mean, he just owned them in his own speech. You don't see that. So, again, State of the Union is going to be his test.
Yeah, I watched that State of the Union and thought it was fine. Here's my take on State of Union versus Town Hall. The State of the Union is off of a teleprompter, and if someone is really struggling to, be a critical thinker and access information and string together arguments on the fly, you wouldn't know if that were the case in a prepared speech. Whereas a town hall, you really got to be willing and able to talk about a variety of topics, which, is important for this job. Like if we were interviewing someone for some mid-level manager job at a company, you'd want to interview them. You wouldn't want to just have them give you a speech, right? The thing about, well, hey, no one's paying attention. I hear you. I mean, we're talking today on Super Bowl Sunday when 200 million people are going to be tuned into this game. Maybe 50 million people would have watched that interview with the president beforehand, and he turned it down. And what I mean, I knowing that everyone has these concerns, I feel like it draws more attention to the age issue. He should just like nip it in the bud and do a few more of these things now. And then a lot of us would be like, okay, we're riding with Biden. I guess he's got enough. Like, I don't need him to look like Barack Obama. Like, he's no Barack Obama. That's fine. He just needs to be, capable like he was in 2020. And we just haven't seen enough of him, in my opinion. What's your take on the whole Super Bowl interview thing? Like, why would he turn?
Okay. Well, first off, I wanted to ask you: do you know how long the supposed Super Bowl interview has been a tradition?
Well, I remember seeing Obama do it. And
That
I've
is the start of
seen
it.
George. Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So he would. I mean, so I think the press has been hyping it up as this supposed big tradition. It just started with Obama, and I actually think Biden made the right decision to not do the interview, and it's because of the fact that Americans just hate politics. Right now, there's a difference between you and I enjoying talking, have a civil political discussion. I
Yeah.
hate politics in the sense of how stupid it has become because we have to argue with all these right wingers, and I think even if I saw a town hall happening with, or sorry, an interview happening with Biden in the Super Bowl, I would cringe and say, I just don't want to think about politics during the Super Bowl. And so if I'm thinking that, somebody who actually is a political junkie practically, I don't want politics in my sports. And I think that's what a lot of voters say. And that's what a lot of voters are going to think, especially the ones who are the undecided, not necessarily the middle, because they're not ideologically in the middle, but the voters who are going to decide the election. They're not going to want to hear some politician do some 10-minute interview during the Super Bowl. They're going to say, God, I'm just tired of politics. Shut up, Biden. And they're going to turn off the TV. And it's not going to really gain him anything. And of course, the press is going to hype it up as this big event. And then if he makes one slip up, whether or not if any other politician did it, the press wouldn't care. But because they're already thinking about it, the press is just they're a pack of wild dogs. And the moment they see something, they're like, yes, we can get something because they don't have a story to report on. I don't think that's as much of the issue, but just the fact that so many Americans don't want politics mixed with sports. So I think Biden made the right choice. There are so many more opportunities for Americans to see him that don't involve a sporting event. Now, I actually think if I was his political advisor, what I would have told him to do, this would be kind of a move that no one's ever done before. I would have showed up to the pregame show, and I wouldn't have done anything political. So I
Mm-hmm.
would have, who Lee Corso is from
No.
ESPN? I would have pulled a Lee Corso. So I'd show up to the pregame interview, the pregame show. 5 minutes of unscripted, not really unscripted, of Biden just, they're asking, Mr. President, who do you think will win? Doesn't say a political thing at all. Nothing political. Just make up something about, oh yeah, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. I believe in Brock Purdy. I think the 49ers are going to win. And the reason I say 49ers is because if he picks the Chiefs and they lose, all the Swifties will blame him for cursing the Chiefs. And then he leaves. That's it. And everybody says, wow, kind of a cool guy. Now that'd be novel. Nobody's ever done that. But I think doing a political interview during a sporting event it makes people uncomfortable. So I think he made the right move.
So just to be clear, I think it was George W. Bush who did the first Super Bowl interview. It wasn't Obama. So it's not like it's just one random interview. Like other presidents have done it.
Oh, then I
It's,
stand corrected. I'm sorry, but
that's fine. Yeah.
again,
I understand it's
I
not like
think it's
since George Washington. I get you.
yeah. I think so many Americans are just not going to want to see politics with sports. That's my big point. Just I think they're going to it could be a politician I like Gretchen Whitmer. Again, if you pulled a gun to my head and you said, who are you going to vote for in the 2028 primary when Biden will not run for president no matter whether he wins or loses, I'd say probably going to vote for Whitmer. I wouldn't even want to see her do some political interview. I think it'd be funny if she showed up to the, during when Michigan was in the national championship, if the governor of Michigan showed up, drunk a glass of beer or something and said, go Michigan and left, right? Just something that makes you seem personable, but not political.
Now, to your point that most people don't want to watch a president sit down for an interview versus just enjoy the game, I agree. Probably most people would not watch the interview. I think the opportunity for Biden was that when you have 200 million people tune in for an event, even if you get 10% of them, that's way more influence than he can get through running a bunch of ads or whatever. And looking up the previous viewership, both Obama and Trump, who did a pre-Super Bowl interview, they got around 20 million viewers of the interview. So people do care. There are people who care, and they're probably the people who we need to influence in November. So and to your point about, well, why didn't maybe Biden could have come onto the show and just talked about how it's all going to come down to Mahomes and Kelsey, or isn't it great that Purdy was called Mr. Irrelevant, people counted him out. I think that'd be fantastic. Why do you think Biden didn't? Do you think that wasn't made available to him?
I'm just saying no president's ever done that. I was just saying no president's ever done that. I think the only time a president has actually done some non-political interview during a sporting event was when in 1969 President Nixon showed up to the Texas-Arkansas game and did a 10-minute thing at halftime about how he thought talking about Texas quarterback, Arkansas quarterback, how good they were. This is not a normal thing. I'm not saying they may not even thought about it. I think they need some imagination, and it's not the end of the world that he didn't do that. I just think he may not have considered it.
Let me ask you this, Dash. If you woke up tomorrow and you saw a announcement by Joe himself, that I've decided that I'm not going to run for re-election after all. I need to focus on the crises that are facing our country now, and I'm very confident in the bench that we have. How would you feel about that?
I know his approval rating would probably jump about 10 points. That'd be number one. If he didn't run for re-election, I would feel nervous. I really would, because I think the two people, again, as I was saying at the beginning of this, the two people who are most likely to replace him are Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, both of whom, again, the election will come down to 6 states: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. That's it. I don't have confidence in those two winning those states. And here's the thing that I think about. So you wonder, okay, who can replace him? I've got names, right? I can put names right now. And the question is, can they get to the magic number of 50%? I don't remember what the number is. I think it's about 2,200 delegates, right, at some open convention. Because there's not going to be a primary, right? If he does that, most of the filing deadlines are gone. Yes. So unless somebody gets about 100% of the votes, which won't happen, because I don't think Kamala is a strong enough candidate, even in a primary, to win, you've got to contest the convention. So you've got about, right, if it happened tomorrow, the filing deadlines for Super Tuesday are gone. The filing deadlines for most of the states in the next couple weeks, like Ohio, Florida, gone. So now you're looking at the April, May, June primaries. That's not a lot of states, because California's gone, Florida's gone, Ohio's gone, you've got Michigan gone, so you've got Pennsylvania, New York. So you're going to have about a third of the delegates that, again, if this were hypothetically happened, a third of the delegates that become pledged delegates. But then, after the first round, the pledged part of those delegates are no longer pledged. So then you have an open convention. It's just open on the floor. Somebody has to get to 2,200. I think that's about the number. Don't hold me to that. So again, I think if Kamala gets it, it's a disaster. If Gavin gets it, it's a disaster. So now we're looking at Roy Cooper from North Carolina. That's my first pick. Okay? And I'm thinking, okay, you're going to have about a third of the delegates, I'm ballparking here, that are going to say, if it's not Biden, we deserve to have our first female black vice president. Don't diss her. We need her. And they're not going to want to vote for Roy Cooper. So then Roy Cooper has got to consolidate. Instead of 50 out of 100%, it's 50 out of 67%. That's a lot. That's a lot of delegates. I don't know whether he can get there really easily. And again, I don't think Democrats would be harmed by a 30 ballot convention. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's the fatigue of you get to ballot number 20 and we're switching between Cooper and Whitmer and Josh Shapiro and Jared Polis and Andy Bashir, and then we pick the path of least resistance and we pick Kamala Harris, and it's a disaster. That's the problem I have. And I don't have any disagreement with somebody who says there is someone who could be a better candidate. Roy Cooper, that's 15 electoral votes that are not those 6 states that we're suddenly knocking off the board, right? So Biden starts with 226 electoral votes. If Roy Cooper picks up North Carolina, a state he won twice, when Trump won the state against Hillary and Trump, now you're at 241, and I'm not even including Michigan yet. That's really good. I love that. The thing is, can he get to 2,200? I don't think so. That's my problem.
You don't think the delegates in the Democratic Party convention in August, with knowing that in that scenario where Biden chose to focus on finishing out his term and not running for re-election, you don't think they would see the math that a Whitmer Shapiro ticket would just easily lock in the White House and block Trump? Like, you don't think Michigan and Pennsylvania would be good to take off the board?
Oh, I think it would. Well, the only thing is, I think if you don't pick Kamala, you have to keep her on the ticket, or black voters are going to be mad.
Okay, Whitmer, Kamala.
So, right, and so then again, I don't know about a Whitmer. I think it's pretty good because I'd love to take Michigan off the board because now you have 241, right? You're at 241 electoral votes, and you're on your way. It's not about that. It's the internal politics of the DNC and the idea of going over the first female black president. Again, there are going to be about a third of the delegates. Because remember, in all of the Solid South, basically the Confederacy states, Democratic delegates are majority black there. The majority of the electorate in all those states is black. They're not going to be happy about that. And I'm not saying that they're wrong or, I'm not trying to enforce the stereotype that black people just vote for black people. That's not what I'm saying. I've just read, they say this. They would be very unhappy with that. And I understand because, yeah, it's the first black female vice president. And again, I think the biggest problem would be delegate fatigue. It's the idea that they get tired enough because we're on the 30th ballot and we're picking between Roy Cooper and Andy Bashir and Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, and nobody's getting to 50%, and so we say, fine, let's pick Gavin. And it's, oh God. That's what I worry about. It's you're just throwing caution to the wind and just hoping, oh boy, I just hope the wrong person doesn't get to 2,200. When instead it's Biden can get to 2,200 because he's the incumbent, and he's the one person who beat Trump, and he can do it again.
So I don't know if I know we should take every poll with a grain of salt, but I just pulled up this one, which is kind of interesting. I've not seen this one before. Maybe other people can point us to a better one. But this is a poll of black voters nationwide, 1,000 black voters. And it suggests that, number one, no surprise, Barack Obama is very favorable among black voters. But it also suggests that Kamala Harris among young black voters has actually less approval rating than Joe Biden, and less overall than Obama, Biden, and about tied with Warnock with the older voters. So I would submit to you that I don't know.
Well, okay,
Harris is like some,
Except here's the thing. That's a poll of voters. We're talking about delegates. That's my whole thing.
Shouldn't the delegates represent the will of the voters?
Well, I'm not saying that they will because if Biden drops out of the race, the voters do not matter anymore. That's the thing. At this point, again, I have no problem with somebody saying Biden shouldn't have run, and maybe somebody could have beaten Kamala if Biden had just said in January of 23. Mm-hmm. I understand that argument. I'm a bit skeptical just because I don't like I feel too much like we're throwing caution to the wind and just hoping voters pick the right person. But at this point, if Biden doesn't do it, the voters' opinion is thrown in the garbage because too many states, the filing deadline is gone. Mm-hmm. And no person, even if people wrote in enough candidates, there's just not enough time. You would have people, nobody would get to 50%. And then at the convention, it doesn't matter. Now, I'm of the opinion, which is an unpopular opinion, that we shouldn't have voters picking the nominees. I don't like it. I think what we should actually have is get rid of party primaries, but get rid of the two-party system, and then have parties pick their nominees, but have more parties than two, because I think the voters are the reason we got Donald Trump in a primary. But that's my unpopular opinion. But I think that just organically, the fact is those delegates in the South are they are not going to give up on Kamala.
Okay. I will concede that if Kamala were not on the ticket, it would be an issue. I don't know if that means that all Black voters would suddenly switch over to vote for Trump or stay home.
Stay home. Yeah, they're not going to vote for Trump. The issue is, do they show up?
Yeah. Maybe maybe a Whitmer Kamala combo would be a good compromise. It's like, hey, we're not demoting anyone. She would have been easy under Biden.
I don't have a problem with it. It's just, if I'm thinking about risk, I just see it as such a small, tiny sliver of the possibilities. It's like we're trying to do West Wing fantasy when we know the most likely thing that's going to happen if we go into that convention is, if we get to the 30th ballot, delegate fatigue will come in, and they're going to pick Kamala or Gavin because they can get a majority. Not because they're the best candidate, not because they're going to be the best president. I actually don't really like Gavin Newsom. But they're going to say, oh, I'm tired of doing 30 ballots of this garbage. Let's pick someone. That's what I really worry about.
Okay. I have another area where you and I agree. Even though I am a resident and voter in the state of California, I'm fine with Newsom as our governor, but I don't think he would be a great national candidate. A lot of people find that he's a little too slick, which doesn't help that he's also from California in terms of stereotypes across the country. So I get that. Let me ask you this, and then we'll take some questions from the I was going to say voters. They're voters too, but from the folks in the chat.
Hopefully voters go out and vote.
Yes. Please participate. Even if you support someone other than who we want, just participate. Dash, tell me a little bit about last question from me. The Her report and the issues around, like, well, they're not going to prosecute him, not because he didn't willfully take the confidential docs. He did, according to the report, but that they didn't think they could convict him because he would be too sympathetic of a figure given his memory issues. Do you think this is a completely partisan hit job, or do you think there's any smoke there?
I think it's a partisan hit job. And let's just back up a little bit, from that. It seems like for the last 60, not 60 years, the last 30 years, Democrats keep getting the short end of the stick in these investigations, right? Every president, or is it people in his administration, have been facing not prosecution, investigations for something. Things happen, right? And it used to be that when you had an investigation, the person who was supposed to investigate you was supposed to be of the opposite party. This is what happened with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon's special prosecutor, I don't remember his name, he was a partisan Democrat. He was a very partisan Democrat, but he was fair, and Nixon fired him. Fired him on the Saturday massacre, and that's what ultimately did lead to his resignation. But then let's move forward, right? Bill Clinton is investigated by Starr, right? Kenneth Starr, who later turned out to be one of the worst college presidents ever, covering up a sexual assault scandal, right? And covering up his own misconduct, which I find quite hypocritical, who basically published a giant porno book about Bill Clinton instead of actually doing anything other than investigate Whitewater the way he should have. Now, we can disagree that Bill Clinton is not the most fantastic human being, but he was unfair to him. Okay, that was a partisan hit job by Kenneth Starr. Okay, so then we get to George Bush for investigations of, did they know about weapons of mass destruction and torture? Who was he investigated by? A Republican, right? He was investigated by James Comey, and and other Bush administration officials who were partisan Republicans. Remember, James Comey is a Republican. Okay, and the whole tradition is supposed to be Democrats investigate Republicans. They didn't do that. Bush's Justice Department said we're going to investigate our own guy, and what happens? Nothing. Even though we probably know that George Bush was a war criminal and a really shady dude, especially Dick Cheney. Okay, so then we get to Hillary Clinton. Who investigates Hillary Clinton? The FBI director, who's a Republican, right? And then it turns out that the week before the election, he decides, yeah, I'm going to publish this thing about her emails. It turns out to not be true, and then she loses the election. Then we get to Donald Trump. Who's he investigated by? Robert Mueller, a partisan Republican. So the tradition now is Republicans investigate Republicans, and Republicans investigate Democrats. And I mean, it's completely hypocritical. It takes over a year and a half for January 6th to have a special prosecutor. For Donald Trump, it takes like a week for a special prosecutor for Biden. And, this whole investigation is being bogged down by Republicans in Congress who want Biden's head. They want his head on a platter, and they haven't gotten it because he really hasn't done anything wrong. First, they had the Hunter Biden investigation, which is now, in its fifth year? It's upteenth iteration of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. They haven't gotten anything. They're angry. And you know why I think Hur did this? I think it's two things. One, he's a partisan Republican. But I think more importantly, he is afraid of the Republicans in Congress who want his head. They wanted Biden to be indicted because they wanted the false equivalency. They didn't get it. And so now he's saying, well, I have to cover something. I'm going to help them out by doing this partisan report of, it's, Sleepy Joe doesn't know who his son is. That's just unfair. The idea is, he didn't know who his son's, day he died is. That's just so scumbag. Like, really? That is truly low. That's some really low stuff. And again,
forgetting when he was vice president.
Yeah, and the other thing is, this was the day after the October 7th attack. And if I'm in some stressful interview where I know that this guy might be some partisan Republican who might want to die, I'm stressed out. I'm thinking about, all these different things. I'd probably do something stupid like that. Oh yeah, what year was I vice president? Like, I know that, my mom, who, it's definitely not as dementia. And I'll mention a year sometimes, like 2008. She says, was that the year Barack Obama was elected? Me, the political junkie, says, yes. Again, we all make dumb mistakes. I think for the last couple minutes, I said special prosecutor. It's actually special counsel. Like, that just happens to people. The special prosecutor was back in the Nixon days, in the Bill Clinton days. Now it's special counsel. Again, I think he did that, A, because he wanted to get on, he is a partisan Republican, and B, he was worried about how Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene would react.
So, Dash, just to confirm, I think what I'm hearing is you're not disputing the fact that Biden got a bunch of things mixed up or wasn't able to recall a lot of details that are documented in the Hur report, but you're saying, hey, that happened to everybody. He was dealing with an international crisis. It was very stressful. Is that kind of a fair summary?
Yeah, I don't know how much you may watch podcasts about crime. I probably need to watch less of that because it makes you suspicious of everything. Witnesses just forget stuff. I actually a couple days ago I was driving and I saw this like weird car with some dude had his flashlight on, just some really shady stuff, and I decided it just something was off about it, and I called 311. I was like, hey, there's just some shady stuff going on. It was like this guy parked in the middle of the street at 2 a.m. like lights off in the middle of a neighborhood, really shady stuff. And they said, what color was the car? And I'm like, I don't remember what the color of the car was. And I felt so stupid. It's like, I just saw it and I forgot the color. And now when you say, okay, did he remember those details? You can say, okay, I don't know. But those are just, it's so minuscule. Like, I remember there was actually this Daily Show bit that Jon Stewart did where he's talking about how Joe Biden was doing this interview, a live interview. I don't remember which channel. And they're asking him, what's the name of the healthcare website for Obamacare? And he says, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I don't know what it is. And Fox News made fun of him forever. And these are the people who are doing the same talking point that, oh, Joe Biden was so much better in 2012 during his vice presidency, and he was forgetting the name of the healthcare website. So I think it's a bunch of bluster, and again, we just have too much recency bias. It's like when if you have a breakup and you think, oh my God, this is the end of the world, and then 2 weeks later you're like, okay, it wasn't that bad. I think this is going to blow over. Stuff happens in politics in the month of February. It's not what matters. Trump is going to be on trial by the election, whether it's in New York, D.C., or Georgia. That's what voters are going to be paying attention to.
Yeah, so I hear you that we all forget things. In fact, Amy Kang was kind enough to remind me. I keep saying 5:37 is actually 5:38. That happens to all of us. I don't think I have dementia yet. I will say, or the color of the car that you saw, I get it. I think like in her interviews, it was more than like, oh, what time of day was this meeting? It was like, oh, this guy and I vehemently disagreed on Afghanistan when they were in agreement. Or, I'm not sure if I was vice president in 2009. I mean, you literally just got elected the year before. I mean, all of us know it was 2008. That was a big year for the country.
Yeah.
Or, the missing, it's not missing Bo's death by the day, it's by multiple years. I don't know, like, let's just say, like, it's not a open and shut case that Biden isn't ready to be president. To me, it opens the door for even more need to have Biden more accessible. And a lot of people have been kind of giving me heat on Twitter saying, you're the only one that wants to see Biden do a town hall. It's not just me. It's like the New York Times editorial board just said, like, this is the least accessible president they've ever covered.
Yeah,
It's
well, that's what. First off, I think the New York Times
Nina
editorial
Turner.
board is full of a bunch of losers who never liked Biden. I don't like them. I remember in 2020 when Biden did an interview with them. They all interviewed the Democratic candidates for the endorsement. They were hostile to him. I mean, you could tell they did not like that guy.
Okay. It
And
was
I
Nina
think
Turner.
they are these
Okay.
uber online people who they have this distorted view of the world that is in this bubble of DC where every little thing matters. If a president mixes up Egypt with Mexico, my God, no one cares. And every political event inside the Beltway is the most important event of the 21st century. And it's like, oh my God, calm down. Not everything not everything actually affects voters. And then they're the same people who do the classic, in this Ohio diner, they care about three things: who's going to win the football game next Saturday, how good are the bacon and the eggs, and did Biden mess up Egypt and Mexico? Like, really, in real life, average people who aren't political junkies just don't care about this stuff. And that's why I do not like the New York Times editorial board. I do not like them. I think they are eager for clicks and engagement from a president who just doesn't give it to them. And I'm sorry if you don't like the fact that the president isn't as accessible as you want him to be because you need more stories. It's just, I don't like them. Now, I don't have any disrespect for somebody who says Biden needs to do the town hall. And I think he will. But again, as I was saying before, right now, his big test is the State of the Union speech, which is going to come up in like 3 to 4 weeks. We haven't, unless Speaker Johnson decides to just not let him go to the House because he has to get permission to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson did that.
That would be crazy. Yeah.
I think the State of the Union is his big test.
Okay. So
And sorry,
let's
my phone is telling me it's about to die, and I need to get a charge. I'll be right back.
okay. All right. While we're waiting for Dash to charge up his phone, if you have any questions that you want me to ask Dash or you want me to comment on, put them in the chat now. And then I will ask Dash one more hypothetical about the coverage of Biden's readiness and whether that's fair or not. But yeah, I'm curious how you guys think this conversation is going. I really appreciate Dash willing to come on the show and make himself available. And I feel like we're able to just totally disagree, but not scream at each other or insult each other. So that's awesome. Hey Dash, welcome back. I had one
All right. Phone's not going to die on me today.
brilliant. I had one follow-up question for you, and then we'll take a couple audience questions, and then we'll get ready for some nachos. First question for me, my last question is: let's just stipulate that the New York Times and Nate Silver and Nina Turner, they're all just poking at Biden for reasons to advocate for their own self-interest, and there really isn't. It's not fair. I think you would agree, despite all of the caveats about polls, that a significant number of voters, some polls say 70%, have a real concern about Biden's age. And he himself, when he was asked about it years ago, said it was a legitimate topic and people should just watch him and see if he has vitality. And he literally said, see if I'm running up into Air Force One and if I'm ready for it. So even if the New York Times coverage is unfair, if you wanted Biden to get reelected as a campaign advisor, shouldn't he put himself out there to basically take this issue off the table? Like it kind of makes it look like he's hiding something by not doing these things.
I think it makes it look like he's hiding something because of the New York Times, the way that they like to cover it. But again, you got to have good, you have to work the press, and I understand that. The only thing I would have to say is the alternative candidates are going to get pilloried by the press. Kamala, the press treats her like garbage. She doesn't deserve it. I think Kamala is a great person who's just not a good politician. I think one way that there's a podcaster named Rick Wilson who's from Florida. Anti-Trumper, and the way he describes Kamala is she's like a batter who hits 100, which is a terrible batting average, but hits home runs, hits grand slams. 50% of her hits are grand slams. Like when she debated Vice President Pence, great job, absolutely great. But she just, when she ran that primary campaign in 2020, it showed that like she was actually doing really well. It showed that a huge portion of Warren supporters, if Warren wasn't in the race, would be supporting Kamala. She was doing great, and then what happened? Her campaign collapsed because she didn't have a real message. I don't think it's. I think the bad press is because of her race, but I don't think she's a bad politician because of her race. There are actually many other candidates who are black women who I think would have been a better vice presidential pick for Biden. I actually thought he should have picked Val Demings, who was a representative from Florida, but turned out to be. But anyway, back to your question, because I'm going to other things. I understand the whole idea that Biden needs to figure out a way to work the press. My only thing is, if we replace him, the two most likely candidates, either Gavin Newsom, who gets pilloried for the shoplifting and the crime and the overspending I think he's not portrayed fairly. They are going to get pilloried worse than Biden. That's my main point.
All right, let's hit some chat questions and then we'll let you go. All right. What's your opinion, Dash, about trans kids should be able to do what they feel is right for their own bodies? Do you think Joe has done enough?
Yes, I think. To answer the first part of the question, should they control their right to their bodies? Absolutely. And I think Republicans are just misusing this issue to misuse and scare parents into thinking things are happening when they're not. They're making parents think that like 10% of all the kids are turning trans, and it's like less than 1%. And it's easy to use this population of people that's less than 1% as this tool of deviant people to try and attack them and scare people. One of the things that they keep saying is, they're going to make these kids do these gender surgeries. Actually, that's not what happens. The gender surgeries are not something until that happens until you're 18. Um, and I think it's perfectly okay for kids to, want to live as the gender they want. And, you know, I completely disagree with Republicans that say that, transgenderism is bad. You know what? If if a person says that their gender is not what they were born with, if that's the worst thing about yourself, then you're the most terrific person in the world. There are so many worse qualities in people. People who hurt animals, people who hurt other people who are selfish, greedy, lazy, not conforming to gender. That's so, it just shouldn't matter at all. And then to say what Joe is doing to protect them. Look, Joe Biden's the president. He's not a dictator. He can only do executive action because laws that protect trans kids require right now 60 votes in the Senate. Until we get enough senators to overturn the filibuster, which it's possible in 2024 if Biden wins by enough. Um, it's an open question. So I think on the executive side, I think he made a great proposal. I don't remember when this was. Maybe it was 4 months ago when he said, we're going to protect trans kids who are in sports. They can have some limitations, but they can't do things like require, any person to say to make an inquiry about a child, and then that person has to go to the doctor and get some, creepy genital examination because some parent complained. They took that one off the table. So I think Biden's doing the right thing. And again, Congress, this is the Republicans' fault because they won't break the filibuster because you need 60 votes. And it's the fault of Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema for not doing it.
All right, let's. We've got a bunch more quick ones, so let's see if we can do these in like 30 seconds or less for each one.
I'm sorry.
This is a this is a comment from Jeremy saying, "Hey, Rob Hur was appointed by Garland. It's hard to claim partisanship here in good faith. What's your response to that?"
Well, I'm not saying that Garland is doing anything bad. I think first off, Garland has been just lackluster in his investigation. Again, it took Garland a year and a half to declare an investigation of Donald Trump, and then it took him like a week and a half. And I think this is not because Garland is partisan, but because he is just too feckless and he's getting too scared of the Republicans in Congress getting mad at him. He's like, "Oh, I don't want them angry at me." I mean, Garland. I mean, he's not going to hear this, but Garland, they're going to be mad at you no matter what, unless you like execute Biden or something. They're going to hate him anyway. But again, Rob Hur is not Merrick Garland, and he is a partisan Republican. And I think he did this because he wanted to find a way so that those Republicans wouldn't get mad at him for not charging him.
All right, next question from Soldier One, who's a channel member as well. I still want to know, even if Biden is actually pretty good, does that matter, or do public perceptions of Biden matter?
I think right now the most important thing for Biden, right? Biden's locked up the abortion voters, and there are actually going to be two states, Nevada and Arizona, they're going to be holding referendums on abortion the day of the election. I think those 17 electoral votes are going to go to him. But to answer your question, right? So he's locked up the abortion voters. The immigration voters are people who are never going to vote for him anyway. These are people who voted for Trump in 2016 and for Trump in 20 because Trump's the first ever issue was the Mexicans are rapists and murderers, which we know is not true. So they're not going to vote for him. So who are the people in the middle? It's the economy, and it's people who are worried about Trump's criming, right? The Trump criming can't do any. Biden can't really control that. Okay, I think there's going to be cases that go to trial. If the January 6th case doesn't go to trial, then we're going to get the New York trial, and we still have the Georgia trial in play, which I think has an effect in Georgia with those 16 electoral votes. So then it's the economy, right? Right? It's the economy, stupid. Biden, it's not going to matter about, whether people think Biden is too old, right? People thought Bill Clinton was, a little shady and, a womanizer, but they said, hey, the economy's doing great. For the first time since 4 years ago, Americans now say that we're not in a recession. Whether or not they're actually right, we haven't been in a recession for a while. For the first time in 4 years, most Americans don't think we're in a recession. Now, I'm not saying the economy is going to get better because it's already good, but Americans' perception of the economy is getting better every single day. And if Biden can get even with Trump on the economy, he wins.
My 2 cents on this is Biden was pretty solid in his first term, especially around Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, Medicare drug pricing, getting enough people vaccinated, and getting the economy on a good trajectory. I think he, as no surprise to everybody else, I think he is a very weak candidate for reelection, and because of a few things. One, I think you cannot go only on policy, because a lot of anti-Trumpers will reluctantly agree that some of Trump policies were okay, but they just say like, but I don't trust the man to do the right thing in the Oval. And similarly, I have no question about Biden's intentions. I do trust that he would try and do what he thinks are best for the country, but I do trust his ability to make those hard calls. And then I have issues with how he's handled his pretty much unlimited support for Netanyahu. I'm not happy with the lack of immigration reform. I realize he agreed to a deal this month, but like, he's been in office for 3 years. And I also think that he hasn't done enough around Medicare for all. But that said, I would still pick him over Trump. But to answer your question, Soldier One, my view is Biden was pretty good for a first termer. And I think if he didn't run for reelection, his legacy would have been very positive. And depending on what happens in November, his legacy is going to be really positive still, or it could be like he's the guy that lost to Trump. We'll see. Let's see. Next question. Oh, there's a comment. BTS Dance Studios. I like this guy, Dash. Smart guy. So I don't think that's a question, but I agree.
Well, thank you.
I like Dash as well. I see your bookshelf is well stocked. What should I read next?
Honestly, I pick what you want. I think reading anything is good. There's not one kind of book that's better. I'm more of a nonfiction fan. Never been a big fiction guy. Got a lot of too many political books up there, but even if you don't read books, read the news, right? Stay involved. I think reading the news is just as good as reading books.
Yeah, I would throw out, and I know there's a lot of Trumpers that think I have TDS, but Oath and Honor by Liz Cheney was a very fun read and got you behind the scenes on how Jan 6 was like a historic and dangerous moment for the country. And it wasn't just tourists being waved into a building. So I would recommend that one.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good recommendation. Lies, Liars, and the Lying Liars and the Lies. God, what is it? It's up there. Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. Al Franken. It's an old book, but it talks about how right-wing media has been lying to you for years, and it's the reason why all these right-wingers are able to get away with basically everything, because they have right-wing media covering for them and a press that basically just makes excuses for them. So that'd be my book recommendation.
Yeah, actually, Al Franken, if he didn't get caught up in that whole Me Too thing, he was a rising star, I think, in the Democratic Party. But whatever. I guess his. By the way, do you think we'll ever see him again in politics?
He has a podcast. I listen to him, but no, he's in his 70s now.
Well, that's ironic. I was 70 too old.
Well, no, I'm just saying. Well, I mean, I do wish Biden were younger. But he is in his 70s now, and it's harder to, if he's not already in politics, it's hard to get back in. You've got two senators from Minnesota that are pretty solid: Tina Smith, Amy Klobuchar. I guess he could run for governor of Minnesota, except that one's not a term limited one. So I don't know. I think he's probably done. But he was just a political, humorist for a while. I think he just won. I think the reason he ran in Minnesota was because he was so mad that Walter Mondale lost in 2002 that he just wanted to absolve that.
All right. Vaughn wants to know, is Biden and Trump supporters similar in a way that we should just support a Biden versus Trump and no one else matters? I think you're kind of saying that. Like, there aren't other alternatives in your view. And
My view is that there is a slim possibility of a better alternative. My big thing is I'm just looking at the two most likely alternatives as Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, and I know who these delegates are, and I just fear that if Biden drops out, the 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 fatigue of trying to pick someone else, it's, we call it the path of least resistance, is going to be one of those two, and I am more worried about those two in a general election than Biden.
all
So again,
right.
I think just calculate, if you calculate it out, it is safer doing the Biden nomination.
Last question from Soldier One. Would Gavin Newsom do that badly?
Yes, and I have a very pointed explanation for this. Right, 6 states. I've been saying them like a bazillion times: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. Okay, those make up 77 electoral votes. Whoever the Democratic nominee is, if we assume that Nebraska 2 goes to the Democrats, that's the suburban Omaha district. Democrats had 226. That means they got to win 44 out of 77. Okay. Trump only needs to win 34. So let's take a look at the swing states, right? First, you've got Arizona, right? Arizona is that John McCain kind of center right. They love John McCain. If the ghost of John McCain were alive today, he could probably still win the state, even though it seems to be turning blue. These are voters that they like Democrats, their social policies, because they're socially liberal. They think gay marriage is great. They think abortion should be legal, and they're actually going to have a vote on abortion in 2024. And I think what they're going to see in Gavin Newsom, whether or not perception is reality, they're going to see the perception of him as, leading this state through, all these crime waves and, the overspending, and California is turning into a wasteland. It's a real perception among a large portion of the electorate, even voters who were center right and voted for Biden the man, not Biden the actually pretty liberal economic policy, but voted for Biden the man. I'm not saying they're going to vote for Trump, but they're going to say, God, I don't want this guy to be president. Okay, so there goes Arizona. Nevada is the unions. Unions in Nevada are not exactly fans of Gavin Newsom. Okay, he's a wine salesman. That's his original thing. He's a business guy, and they're going to look at him in his work in the San Francisco City Council as somebody who cut a lot of things. Whether or not it was for the good or not, they're going to see him as this pro-business candidate. I don't think they trust Gavin Newsom to be their guy, and those unions should realize he's going to be a better candidate than Trump. But a lot of those culinary unions in Nevada, right? You've got the casinos in Reno, casinos in Vegas. Those are the people that they need. I don't think they're going to like him. So you take Nevada off the board. Then you go to the Midwest. And I don't think these Midwesterners, right, the people in the WOW counties, Waukesha, Washington, Ozaukee, in around Milwaukee, the people in Southwest Wisconsin, in the Driftless region of Wisconsin that they need, I think they're going to look at Gavin Newsom and say, this guy's a car salesman. They're just going to say, I don't like this guy. I don't trust him. He just seems weird. And they're going to hear all that stuff about the crime in California. We don't want Wisconsin to be California. Trust me, even people who voted for Biden in Wisconsin don't want their state to turn to California. It's just, that's the way it is. And then you've got the manufacturing unions in Michigan. They're not going to be that up on Gavin Newsom. And then you've got Georgia. Can some Californian really go into the South and try and get those Atlanta suburbs? Again, the path to 270, or really the path to 44 electoral votes out of those 6 states is rough. It's really rough with Gavin Newsom. I don't like him as a candidate. I think he's probably a good person, but
I agree with your concerns about Newsom, and that's probably why I'm not as concerned, maybe as you are, that the party would nominate him, because he has so many obvious flaws versus a Whitmer or a Pritzker or a Shapiro or Cooper, who are just bring a lot more to the table. We'll have to wrap it up at this point, Dash. I very much appreciate you spending time on the Nerds channel, and hope you enjoy the Super Bowl, and really want to thank you for taking the time to have a civil, cordial conversation, even though we have different candidates that we'd like to see get the nomination, but we all want the best outcome for the country in the long run. And I know we all have positive intent.
All right. Thank you so much. And I guess I'm supposed to say for your show, thank you, nerds, for listening.
Yes. Goodbye, nerds. See you guys later.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Let me just give a quick thank you because I got to go to the supermarket to buy some Super Bowl snacks. I'm sure it's not going to be busy. But before I do that, I want to thank the people who helped pay for the streaming software and the podcast hosting fees. And we currently don't cover our costs. So we definitely would love to have more members pitch in. But the biggest supporter is none other than Soldier One. Secondly, at the VP level, so Soldier One's a senior vice president. At the VP level, we have Kristen Slevin and Bike. At the hardcore level, I forgot music. Hold on. At the hardcore level, we have Gene, David, DK, Jekylego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, John, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Mickey, and Yoka. And then at the entry level, which is only $1.99 a month, verified nerds, I will scroll on the screen now. So thank you to all of you nerds for making this channel possible. If you want to see more content, feel free to join as a member. If you can't join as a member, then definitely consider liking and sharing this content out so more people can discover it. And let me know in the comments below if you were convinced by Dash that, Biden really is the best option right now, or do you think there's still time before that convention to pick another quarterback? Bye, nerds.